matters to British trade unionists. On one level, that's the case. If one worker is not free, none of us are free. You know, and the slogans of the British trade union movement, "Injury to one is an injury to all." But it's not just for that reason, I think, that it's important, this launch and this attempt to develop international solidarity. It's also that India is the most populist democracy in the world at the moment. And we live in a global and globalising world, although many people are in denial about it. And the key issue is, on what basis does that happen? Does it happen in the basis of corporate exploitation, or on the basis of international solidarity? I think that's what's at stake here. I just want to make a few points today, as a British trade unionist, looking a bit from the outside, I suppose, looking at it from a perspective of international trade unionism, what particular concerns the TUC has, especially in terms of the relationship of possible trade deals, issues around workers' rights, what I know about what's workers' rights in India, and what resonates with me in very different but circumstances here in Britain, but actually a lot of the same principles, and also the wider issue about the political and economic ideology and the politics that backs up the economic liberalism that oppresses us all. From the sort of international TUC, there was a recent conference of the international TUC, and they have a little catalogue of, you know, all the worst employers and all the worst countries, and India is on that list. It is one of the worst places to be a worker, according to the International Trade Union. Okay, as I was saying, it's well known, people throughout the active as trade unions throughout the world, of India is one of the worst places to be a worker. Obviously, the most recent fights around the labour laws in 2020 are well known, I think. But it's not just that, it's the persistent exploitation and low pay. There's also issues around civil liberties, including obviously the Citizenship Act and Moses attacks on all minority groups. And certainly I think on the agenda of trade unions throughout the world is the big issues of gender inequalities in India, and also issues around how migrant workers are treated. Again, from the perspective of the international trade union movement, the investor-state dispute settlements, which allow foreign powers, foreign investors to sue governments for actions by not actually allowing people to make profits, are also a big issue, and that seems a threat to workers' rights in India, and also obviously the government's rights to be progressive around public procurement, state ownership, and the attacks I know that are happening, privatisations around health, education and transport, as well as obviously wider environmental concerns. So these are things that people in the international trade union movement are aware of, are issues in India. Particularly here in the UK, the issues around pretty much lauded ideas that after Brexit we're going to have trade deals with all these other parts of the world. The TUC and other people lobbied when this was first mooted, that actually the priority of this government, our British government, good luck to us, but we expect this, that they should actually conduct deals that are respectful of workers' rights and fundamental human and labour rights, and we shouldn't be having deals where international labour organisation standards aren't respected. As I said, I think there's probably not really being listened to by this current government, but that is the position of the trade union movement. And it's about freedom of association, the right to organise, and collective bargaining. But it's also about things like civil liberties and gender equality as well. Yeah. Yes, I mean, other concerns that the British trade union movement is aware of is the displacement of Indian workers from stable jobs by the lowering of tariffs, particularly in agriculture and issues around food security, and also the increasing outsourcing from the UK to India, not least in sectors such as the telecom sector. But workers' rights, I mean, that's a concern, if you like, from the outside. The British trade union is looking at what's happening in India, looking at the way in which that's going to affect us in terms of possible trade deals. But I think there are things that are in common, despite slightly very different circumstances, and that we recognise as British trade unionists. The increase of precarious employment, unpaid family labour, slightly different maybe in India than it is here, but there is unpaid domestic labour here. Increasing casualisation, how the COVID pandemic has laid bare the inequalities and workplace injustices, particularly for particular groups of people, and also the attacks on the public sector and privatisation. I think in Britain we give the world a lesson on that privatisation, because we were one of the first to do all that. And the general issue of deregulation and the attacks. People are aware there's an EU bill going through Parliament, which would take away, if unless challenged, will take away really basic rights here in the UK around holidays, and also attacks on the right to strike. And also perhaps some ideological things that are quite similar. But the rationale that we get from our current government is that they have to have deregulation, they have to carry on with neoliberalism, austerity, market fundamentalism, what you want to call it, because that's the only way we get growth. It's jobs and growth that way. And we recognise that ideology is also happening in India too. Okay, and just the last sort of similar difference is also issues around sexual harassment at work and the idea of having a safe workplace. Obviously, different issues and maybe more persistent, or there are different, I'm not trying to say two countries are totally the same. However, there is a well-recognised issue around sexual harassment in the workplace here in Britain that's being much more exposed, and also we know about some of the issues that are happening in India, and also the International Labour Organisation standard, Code 190 against violence against women and girls, is also something that both labour movements in both countries can campaign on. Just sort of to say a little bit more before I finish about sort of the ideology and the politics that arises from all these situations for workers and for workers' rights. There is, obviously, because in India it's a big developing economy, it comes along with it the ideology of the ideological illusion that we need freedom in order to have the new era of the entrepreneur, and that actually when it comes to it, workers choose that freedom because it's good for them, rather than that being the only thing on offer. And we still get that ideology here in Britain, although I think with what's been happening with the cost of living crisis, that's much more being challenged, and in a sense it almost feels like we're at the end of that. We're at the end of that ideological era where people thought trickle-down economics and neoliberalism was the only way to be. So I think we can recognise the ideologies in both countries. But I think what's perhaps politically the most significant thing is the Modi government, and the way in which autocratic nationalism is backing up the economic liberalism. So the nationalist right is a threat to civil liberties, is a threat to democratic freedoms, but it's also used to back up economic liberalism. And also we're aware obviously of issues around far-right vigilantism and all the issues that you've talked about in terms of the caste system and women's rights and attacks on minorities. I think that's a really important thing to recognise, because we live in a time where people use the word liberalism in a very, very vague way, and to recognise that economic liberalism is backed up by political illiberalism and leads to social illiberalism is really important for us to differentiate all those things. Otherwise, we let the ideology of things that we do want, more tolerant society, a fairer and more equal society, gets mixed up with the idea of economic liberalism, which we know is oppressive. Just the last few points about, and I think it's, I know it's an aspect of your campaign, Indian Labour Solidarity, is to actually draw out connections with the BJP and the Tories. I'll maybe leave it to other people to go into more detail about that, and the way in which, unfortunately, that ties with the ideas of post-Brexit opportunities, but also it's about those of us who are active in the Labour Party and in unions that are active in the Labour Party, to recognise that we need to challenge any connections within the labour movement around giving any call to authoritarian nationalism and the far right in the Modi mode. But again, I'm very pleased to be here at your launch, recognising how important it is to build up the international solidarity links. It's only by actually building up stronger international working class links that we can hope to build a better world.